Unicorn Overlord. As with any tactical RPG, the core gameplay boils down to menuing. Moving units on the map, checking for stats and skills, and managing your character's equipment. Every character comes equipped with a weapon by default, but did you know you could just remove it? Unfortunately, this doesn't mean weaponless characters will just start punching and kicking people. No, the combat animations are unchanged, but the unarmed character simply lacks any benefits they would have received from wielding a weapon. This got me thinking, is it possible to beat the game without weapons? Weapons can grant many effects, such as stat boosts, new skills, extra AP or PP, which, are definitely important considerations down the line. But, the more pressing matter right now is, how do I get past the first stage? Equipment and tactics cannot be edited during the tutorial, so the challenge truly begins once we arrive in Cornia and call to action. To start, I select the hardest difficulty because, masochism, I guess, and remove the weapons from all my characters. The starting bronze weapons grant 8 physical attack, so removing them results in a massive downgrade to my character's firepower. To illustrate the point, against the 10 defense housecarls on this map, a level 1 Elaine goes from dealing 9 damage with a bronze sword equipped to dealing just 1! Joseph has it going even worse for him. Due to being reliant on his 15 Might Templar sword, he goes from 32 to 2 damage. Joseph actually has the same physical attack as Elaine, but since Joseph is cavalry, his damage dealt is doubled against infantry. Since killing enemies will take many bouts of combat to accomplish, I will have to find a way to survive against many attacks. The most optimal unit I can make comprises Travis and Clive. Offensively, Travis's passive steal is a 2-hit attack, meaning he will deal the minimum 1 damage twice for a total of 2. And Clive's base 12 physical attack, plus his status as cavalry, lets him deal an earth-shattering 4 damage. Defensively, Travis's superior evasion and evade passive skill allows his unit to avoid taking damage altogether. Additionally, passive steal robs the target of their PP, preventing housecarls from using parting blow at the end of combat and enabling more evades. With the silken scarf equipped, it's virtually a coin flip for Travis to dodge or not, so the RNG may not always be in my favor and can put Travis in peril. Fortunately, I can fiddle with my unit formation by spreading Travis and Clive out and keeping the center column empty. The housecarls will pull from the RNG to decide which character to attack, thus advancing the RNG to yield a different outcome. In this case, Clive takes the hit, which is a far better result than the squishier Travis getting smacked. Although finding the housecarls may be slow, I can at least eventually defeat them, which is something I can't say is the same for the required bridge fight guarded by 2 soldiers. The soldiers have 1 more point of defense than the housecarls, which reduces Clive's damage to 2, or 3 on a crit. The back row soldier will use their passive skill, First Aid, at the end of combat, which heals for 25% of the recipient's max HP, effectively negating all the damage I dealt. In order to make any gains and not draw for eternity, Clive needs another point of strength, which requires 2 level ups in order to reach level 4. Barring guards or misses, Travis and Clive will deal combined 6 damage, and after factoring in only 1 First Aid since Travis steals the front soldier's PP, I deal 1 damage overall, which is progress. The bare minimum to even constitutes progress, but I'll take anything. So, technically, I have the means to fight and succeed in combat without any weapons equipped, but there are 2 glaring obstacles in my way before I can call this map solved: stamina and the time limit. Whenever a unit goes into combat, their stamina will deplete by 1. Once a unit's stamina reaches 0, they will no longer be able to move. The only way to regain stamina without any external factors is to use the rest command, which will recover 4 stamina, but renders a unit immobile and unable to fight for a set amount of real time. With Travis as the leader, his unit starts with 6 stamina, and his leader skill, Quick Rest, reduces rest time from the standard 15 seconds to 9 seconds. Using the rest command, or instead waiting for the enemies to approach me, will eat up precious time. Reaching the time limit, which is 2 minutes and 40 seconds for this map, results in a game over. So despite my ability to fight, I also need to play fast to win. With all this knowledge in mind, I give it a go. I begin by equipping Clive with the Recruit Shield and Chloe's Charm in order to maximize his EXP gain, then deploy Travis at the command post, letting the 2 aggressive housecarls approach me. Once the housecarls are pushed back and forced into cooldown, I withdraw and redeploy Travis to be right under the enemies. My goal is to push them into a corner, so after they're knocked back, they'll bounce off the wall directly back into me, allowing me to refight instantly, as opposed to having to take time chasing them down. By this point, I have killed the front housecarl in both units, but Travis has also run out of stamina. Although he cannot move with 0 stamina, he can still fight. So long as he's close enough, another unit can initiate combat and then swap positions with the 0 stamina Travis. Stamina cannot go below 0, so this lets Travis's unit fight constantly without further depleting his or the swapping unit's stamina. Fortunately, knockback distance is within swapping range, so I can continue shifting Travis into battles until the initial 2 housecarls are defeated. As Travis takes a well-deserved nap, I scope out my next move. The victory condition is to defeat Aubin, but in order to reach him, I need to break through the bridge guarded by the soldiers. Since Clive only got to level 3 off of those 2 housecarls, my next goal is to fight the enemies around the ruins. Since the garrisoned housecarl doesn't move after losing combat, I'm able to quickly repeat battles against him until he's bested. Joseph claims the ruins and finds my ulterior motive for this detour, a Dew of Strength. This is a stat booster that permanently increases a character's physical attack by 1, so I immediately give it to Clive. Courtesy of the Cavalry class trait, every 1 physical attack is essentially doubled against these infantry foes. Clive goes from dealing 4 to 6 damage against the housecarls, enabling him to be more efficient at defeating them, and eventually getting yet another point of physical attack through level up. As Travis goes Betty by again, Chloe and Hodrick have been holding down the fort against the reinforcements from the harbor. Once he gets moving again, Travis liberates the harbor, though at the cost of all his stamina. The good news is that he doesn't need to rest again, since the soldier bridge is right there. Now having 14 physical attack, Clive can deal a devastating 6 damage to them. Coupled with Travis's 2 damage and accounting for the 5 healed HP from first aid, I can deal a whole 3 damage per combat. I do need to constantly check that the RNG goes my way, because it is possible for either the soldier to guard against passive steal, preventing the PP from being taken, or Clive to miss a 95% hit, in which they heal more than I can deal. Clive actually has the same initiative stat as the soldiers, so by shifting him around the formation, I can change the order of when Clive attacks in relation to the soldiers, which could turn a potential miss into a hit, or even result in landing a critical. Fighting just 1 soldier is much easier, since Travis completely removes their ability to heal, thus letting me beat the last soldier far more quickly. By the time the bridge is freed, I have just a little under half the time limit remaining. Instead of resting, I use the soldier reinforcements to gradually inch towards Aubin. His unit is a doozy. Having to fight a unit of 2 soldiers is already an anguish-laden task, so going up against a unit with 2 soldiers and Aubin, all of whom have massive HP stats, is brutal. Travis has to dodge 4 attacks to come out alive, and I only deal 2 damage to a 41 HP soldier per fight, so the odds of winning and taking Aubin down are horrendous. Thankfully, after engaging Aubin in combat for the first time, I finally unlock Valor skills. Clive's Valor skill, Wild Rush, is an out-of-battle attack, allowing me to deal damage without receiving any form of counterattack. Each Wild Rush deals 10 damage to Aubin's soldiers, so 4 Wild Rushes would kill the soldier I did 2 damage to, and leave the other one at 1 HP. However, Wild Rush costs 3 Valor points, thus I need a total of 12 Valor, but the game caps the maximum amount of Valor points you can have at once to 10. This is where Chloe comes in. After spending 6 Valor on 2 Wild Rushes, Chloe liberates the harbor that I intentionally never claimed, letting me bank on the 1 Valor point that the player is rewarded with through liberating a town. Then Chloe withdraws, which returns me another Valor point, getting me up to the 6 Valor necessary to unleash the final 2 Wild Rushes. Meanwhile, Aubin has taken significant damage from the Wild Rushes, so 2v1ing him is a simple affair, letting me finally strike him down after spending hours on the stage. Oh wait, did I say hours? Sorry, what I meant to say was 1 minute and 58 seconds. I'm finally able to explore the overworld, picking up sparkly divine shards and items off the ground, while I leverage my options as for what to do next. Even taking into account overworld quests, I don't have enough renown to reach D rank. This means no hiring generics just yet, so we're stuck with the characters we started with, plus Aubin. Clearly, what I need is more firepower. Since buying weapons isn't an option, I settle on fighting Ock. The reason is twofold. For one, wizards are quite frail, so I should have an easier time fighting. And two, I want to recruit Ock and his fellow wizards, since they attack with magic and inflict burn with fireball. However, this map is by no means a walk in the park. The many Watchtower wizards have devastating magic assists, which will tear through any unprepared unit. Fortunately, adding Joseph to Travis and Clive's unit solves a lot of my problems. His leader skill greatly reduces the damage dealt by opposing magic assists, and he can take up a clerical role with heal to ensure the boys stay healthy. The Knight class's active skill, Assaulting Lance, grants the user +1 AP if they get a kill, effectively making it a free action. Unfortunately, unless Travis deals some chip damage first, Clive cannot one-shot wizards without landing a crit. A surviving wizard with PP will counterattack with magic counter, but thankfully, Joseph's Holy Barrier halves the damage dealt, making it far less life-threatening. Although taking down the first Watchtower used up all of Joseph's stamina, Elaine and Chloe used the other enemies to shuffle him to the fort. The fort boss is a fighter in the front row, whose physical defense is so high that even an unguarded critical hit from Clive only deals 1 damage. With Joseph's pursuit added to the mix so he can contribute offensively, I can whittle the fighter down at a rate of 5 HP per combat. As such, liberating this fort will take ages, giving Ock's reinforcements ample time to garrison out the bridge and reach my units. I finally hit the fighter 41 times, and, at long last, beat the stuffing out of the squishy back row wizards, taking control of the fort. But just to have a brief moment of euphoria, it all comes crashing down as I come face to face with the biggest threat yet. 3 soldiers. First aid will heal for 6 HP, and since Travis can only prevent 1 of them, I literally cannot deal any damage. Since I don't want Joseph to suffer from lose cooldown, Elaine takes one for the team, and sees firsthand just how futile it is to fight against this impenetrable wall. Upon closer inspection, I now see that the bridge was claimed by a frontline fighter, who will get healed for a total of 20 HP from the 2 soldiers' first aids, something I have no means of preventing since they're hiding in the back row. I literally cannot afford having Ock summon more soldier trios, so I need to beat this map fast. I wild rush Joseph ahead, a move made out of sheer desperation to get him away from the scary soldiers, but I do manage to kill the wizards en route. Consequently, Elaine and Chloe are left alone to fend for themselves. With the healing font S, I can assure Elaine's unit won't die, and he and Aubin actually managed to take one of them out. In order to get Joseph moving again, I use a smoke nut to regain 1 stamina. Since it is mathematically impossible to deal damage to the unit on the bridge, let alone any hope of defeating them, my plan was to wild rush through him, but it didn't work. I'm sure it's possible, I assume I just couldn't find the right angle to cross the bridge, but whatever the case, wild rush is not the answer. As I was mashing the A button in vain, I had a stroke of genius. Chloe was able to withdraw and redeploy with a fighter of my own, Lex. His Valor skill, Provoke, will draw an enemy towards him. This doesn't affect foes stationed at towns, forts, or command posts, but it does affect those garrisoned at bridges. This gives Joseph the opportunity to charge ahead and forcibly vacate the last watchtower, but I need stamina to move and attack again. Joseph has caught the wandering enemy's attention, so I don't have 15 seconds to spare resting, thus I use yet another smoke nut to finish off the watchtower. The reason I was so hesitant to nut is because, in True Zenoiran difficulty, each stage has an item use limit of 5. I've used 1 healing font and nutted twice, meaning I only have 2 items left. Elaine's been holding down the fort quite comfortably. I'm not even over halfway through the time limit, so I figure I can afford to have Joseph stand his ground until he gets a good opportunity to rest. However, this plan fell apart once I saw that the soldier fighter team was coming back to kick Joseph's ass. Realizing I can't sit around, I bite the bullet and use my final nut, then rush towards, well, more accurately, wild rush through Ock in hopes to end the map now. Travis steals 2 PP from the soldier, preventing any enemy healing and giving himself 3 evades, which proves useful since, in addition to the active skill attacks, Travis will also have to avoid Ock's end of battle Fire Burst. I intentionally wild rush to get to the other side of Ock, knocking Joseph into the wall and ricocheting back to instantly fight again, but this only works the 1 time. I just need a few more battles against Ock to win, so I use the grilled steak I found beforehand as my final item and restore 5 stamina. The first combat post-stake goes great, and the soldier is right at death's door. But I don't like the battle forecast for the next fight, and no amount of fiddling with Joseph's unit alters the results to something more favorable. Out of options, I make a lane abandon post and get into a fight to advance the RNG, and it actually pays off. Now that the soldier's gone, the subsequent fights are a lot less concerning, now that Travis can passive steal Auk, eliminating any possibility of an AoE fire burst. Clive can easily defeat the generic wizard and Auk, and Joseph's unit succeeds with just 1 stamina remaining. Although I cannot use the cool fire burst staff I'm rewarded with, I graciously accept Auk into the army. I would also like to hire some generic wizards, but I still don't have enough clout. That's fine, because Auk is all I need to confidently head into Morden's map. Breaking into the city goes about as you'd expect. I sought Travis's unit in to fight the big man with the big hammer. Auk's magic stat is pretty respectable, and his fireball does alright damage. But if he's fast enough to inflict burn before a foe uses their active skill, they will take a fixed 20 damage before they perform their action, which can be lethal. Unfortunately, Auk does not outspeed Morden nor his soldier, thus the battles end without them taking burn damage. All this means is I just have to have Travis swap in and fight 8 more times, until Morden's brought down to his knees. Liberating Barmatimo is a massive boon. Of course, we get the physical attack boosting Warriors Medallion and recruit Morden himself, but we have also earned enough renown to hire better versions of my existing characters. I hire an offensive knight who already has more physical attack than Clive to hit harder, a lucky thief who has more evasion than Travis to serve as a more reliable dodge tank, and a go-getter wizard who has more initiative than Auk to hopefully make better use of causing burn damage. The armory at Barmatimo stocks a bunch of great accessories I can use to outfit my units. It was here that I realized I forgot to ever visit Palavia, which has the Battler's Shield that grants +2 physical attack, and the Dancer's Bracelet, which grants the passive skill Powerful Call, buffing an ally's physical attack by 30% for their next action. I've had access to this since completing the first stage, meaning I could have bought this stuff before doing Auk's map, and have made my life significantly easier, so, whoops. The next order of business is to pick up my favorite shaman and gain access to sigil battles. Now that I have 2 Thief Knight units, I'm pretty confident in fighting, and my new attack buff knight can actually one-shot things, which is a sight for sore, weaponless eyes. The boss here is pretty tough, but Burn is able to wear them down effectively enough to get the job done. Now that I have a secure process, I can grind the sigil to level up my army, which enables me to sweep through the remaining battles in Cornia. I guess I have yet to explicitly outline the rules of this challenge, so now's as good a time as any. Characters under my control, the blue units, must have their weapon slot empty. This means no swords, axes, spears, bows, or staves. I'm sure that was obvious, but there are some weird edge cases. Green units, like Rolf, cannot be directly ordered, nor can I alter their equipment, and, by default, they wield weapons. I'm allowing green units to fight since they're a completely separate entity outside of my direct control, and by extension, this allows the use of the Sellsword Summon Valor skill. I think this is fair since they're not too overbearing on True Zenoiran, and they cost precious Valor. On a related note, all difficulties besides True Zenoiran have Hollowed Cornash, a consumable item that grants 2 Valor points. On True Zenoiran, this item is replaced by Luminous Cornash. Its purpose is to revive characters who have succumbed to permadeath, which is just whatever, but the important takeaway here is that I lack an easy, instant source of Valor. As such, without even considering the 5 item use limit, I cannot easily spam Valor skills to my heart's content. When it comes to units I gain access to during a stage, like Rolf after talking to him, I can edit their inventory to remove their weapons, but there are some exceptions, such as Oclese. In these cases, I'll just move them away from the enemies and prevent them from fighting. Well, now that the rules have been ironed out and I've cleared enough missions to get C rank and 4-member units, it's time to progress the story. What I'm about to say and do may come as a shock to many of you considering the premise of my last Unicorn Overlord video. But let's rescue Scarlett. There are many enemies between myself and Renault, but my units have become quite capable of disposing enemies of this level. Morden has the crude Tacit, which lets him use Warcry at the start of battle and increases already impressive physical attack by 20%. Clive also dons the crude Tacit, but he gets additional help from Chloe's powerful call, and Aubyn's rolling axe helps set up kills for assaulting lance. Selvi with the Familiar's Choker can help buff Yana's magic attack by 50%, thanks to Sorcerer's Connection. Unlike Powerful Call or Inspiration, which only lasts for one attack, the magic buff from Sorcerer's Connection lasts for the rest of the battle. This comes at the cost of the user's magic attack getting lowered by 50%, but since Selvi's a shaman who can't attack anyway, there's virtually no drawbacks. Berenice and her fellow sellsword don't need any buffs to wreak havoc. Their basic attack skill, Heavy Slash, has 150 potency, and they get plenty of opportunities to strike through countering with their passive skill, Following Slash. I also received the Knights of the Rose, but without their weapons, they're far less effective in combat, though they can at least handle fighting the frail wizards in the Watchtower. Eventually, my units reach Renault. I begin by targeting the soldier in the back row, since I don't want her using first aid. Hawk and the Thief use their ranged attacks to target her directly and inflict status, though this turns out to be largely unnecessary, as my Knight's Cavalier Call boosted Wild Rush would have basically killed her without any assistance. The reason I brought 2 Thieves was to 1, spread poison on multiple enemies, and 2, ensure I can survive Renault's column attacking Wild Rush. Renault's no challenge, but the map won't end until I defeat Galerius too. I rearrange my units and throw together 2 pairs of Wizards and Thieves. My game plan is to win through Afflictions, Poison from Toxic Throw, and Burn from Fireball. Poison typically deals 30% of a character's maximum HP. The poison damage against Galerius is halved. A poison foe cannot get poisoned any further, but Burn can stack, dealing 20 damage per burn level, something Galerius demonstrates for us spectacularly. Now that Scarlett is saved, the world of Fevrith has opened up beyond Cornia's borders, with the game suggesting going either into Drakenhold or Elheim. Since I went to the Scarlett mission decently overleveled, I'm closer to the enemy levels in Elheim. However, my damage output is heavily reliant on afflictions, and the Elven class's main gimmick is to cure themselves and others of debuffs. This utterly shuts down my ability to deal any significant amount of damage, so Drakenhold it is. The first map goes well, at least in the sense that I can defeat the enemies I come across. However, my methods of fighting are far from efficient, thus requiring a lot of stamina consumption and resting. If I feel like this mission is slow, the desert maps are going to take years off my life. In order to preserve my sanity, I ignore the other desert gangs, accepting the gold loss from the plundering thieves and flying straight towards Magellan, the only guy I need to defeat to end the map. While Lane guards home base, Oclise makes it to Magellan, but I target the Watchtower first. Obviously, this hunter's ranged assist would be a thorn in my side were to I ignore it and find Magellan instantly, but I have an ulterior motive claiming the Watchtower for myself. Doing so turns into an allied facility, allowing a unit to use the Conveyance Stone item to instantly warp themselves to it. There are superior methods to warping, namely the Conveyance Crystal item and the Witch's Teleport Valor skill that allows for a unit to teleport to an allied facility or an allied unit. But Conveyance Crystals are much rarer than the stones, plus I don't have any yet, and teleport would require 2 Valor points and having a Witch on said unit. Thus, this was the least costly answer. Between Oclise and the Thief Wizard units, Magellan goes down and victory is ours. This got me thinking, if I'm going to be fighting strategies to avoid unnecessary battles and go straight for the win condition anyway, why not try punching above my weight and... To gain entry into Bastorias, I have to seize the Umbalcan's checkpoint. This map's enemy level is 25, which is much higher than the levels of my own characters, and they're promoted, so I opt to start the battle by summoning warriors to remove the Watchtower. The level of these summons aren't based on the summoner, but instead the map's enemy level, so they put up a good fight. A short fight, but good. I replace Elaine and the sellswords with the Thieves and Wizards to clean up the battered Rogue and Great Knight. This nets me enough valor to deploy another unit, because although I can easily evade damage and win off affliction damage, I run out of stamina, so I need the extra unit to swap Aachen and finish the job. Now that I can enter Bastorias, the next item on the docket is the complete Tempest of White. This is technically a defense map, but that can be ignored entirely by defeating Conrad and ending the map. Fortunately, he's not too far away. I need to get rid of that healing assist watchtower before I have any hope of taking him down. I begin by deploying Fran's unit and buffing her with Haste and Call, while sending Unify back to get another Valor point. Fran's job is to dispose of the bishops in the watchtower, which is a surprisingly tough task. Their healing outclasses my current damage output, what with being underleveled and not having weapons equipped. If I can't take them all out of commission via standard offense, I opt to stop them with Freeze. An Ice Conferral buffed High Swing freezes all three of them, which prevents any healing or debuff removal. From here, I target a single bishop to kill in this combat. A frozen character becomes unfrozen upon being attacked, so I make sure she's unable to act with stun and more freeze. I'm only capable of defeating one bishop per combat, but I do get the job done, meaning I can claim the watchtower to give myself a warp point for other units. All of the setup and inevitable fighting takes real time, giving wandering enemies the opportunity to close in on my units or command post. Instead of attempting to fight them, I use the Witch's Gravity Valor skill and items like the Steel Trap and Barricades to keep them at bay, letting me focus on Conrad. The opposing Druid starts the battle with Cursed Swamp, which inflicts my whole unit with -10 initiative and -30 evasion. Since the lowered evasion would thwart my front thief's ability to dodge tank reliably, I had to field a cleric like Prim to remove his debuffs with Refresh. Thanks to the Angel Plume's Tailwind, I can neutralize the initiative debuff, which allows my backline to inflict status before the enemies act, and actually deal damage from poison and burn. Evidently, Prim cannot contribute anything offensively, which is unfortunate, but Refresh is too valuable to counter Curse Swamp. The two Thieves' Poison and the single Wizard's Burn are sufficient in taking Conrad and his row down within a few combats, but the front row Berserkers are trouble. They have massive HP stats, and they will always use their first action to heal themselves with Mounting Charge, and hitting them will activate Bulk Up to heal even more, so I plan my moves carefully, ensuring they can trigger Berserk to give themselves another AP and consequently suffer another dose of status damage. Fortunately, I can bring their health low enough for my Bishop Strike Squad to clean up before they get a chance to heal off my progress. Clearing this mission grants me Unify & Co., as well as access to shops with higher tier accessories, but this was merely a stepping stone in order to explore more of Bastorias. Namely, I go after Bryce in the Battle of Solvaquad. No longer needing Prim's Refresh, I can shift Auk back into the team to stack more burn damage, and blaze through the stage with relative ease. Now, it may not be entirely clear why I went through the effort to enter Bastorias early. I mean, I could have definitely used the same strats here to have cleared Drakenhold by this point, but don't fret, I have a plan. Listen, I'm just gonna need you to. The fortified city of Solvaquad is a significant location because it's the earliest place the higher werebears. They're similar to gladiators and berserkers in the sense that they boast massive HP stats, but the werebear class's attributes are more defensively oriented, what with their grit shields and being considered armored. However, the reason I care about werebears is due to their passive skill learned at level 25, Life Blow. Like the Housecarl's Parting Blow, this is an end of battle attack, meaning it will only trigger after all active skills have transpired. Side note, end of battle skills can only activate once per character, even if they have remaining PP afterwards. Life Blow stands out because instead of using the standard damage calculation that compares attack and defense, Life Blow deals damage equal to 80% of the user's current HP. Throughout the challenge thus far, all of my attack skills have been effectively weakened due to my characters lacking weapons to boost their attack power, but Life Blow's efficacy is wholly unaffected. In order to deal as much damage as possible, I make my werebear's growth types hardy to maximize their HP. I want access to more bears, so I head towards Bertrand, the only non-generic werebear in the game. This map has 3 routes: Birthright, where you align with the bear to fight the wolf to retain peace, Conquest, where you align with the wolf to fight the bear to conquer land, or Revelation, where you fight against both of them. This middle path lets you recruit both Bertrand and Govel, but I don't care about getting Govel, and wouldn't dare lay a finger on my brother bear Bertrand. So of course, I walk bare hand with him to teach Govel a lesson. He joins immediately, but unsurprisingly, his team is way less competent without weapons, so I let him lay back at the base while my Thief Wizard unit protects it, newly upgraded courtesy of the freshly hired Rogue. But if this unit, the team that has basically done all the important boss battles, is playing defense, who's gonna fight Govel? This is where the werebears come in. With a hasten call and concealing cloak, the unit can quickly sneak up to Gobble undetected. Before I fight him, I use a beckoning bell to provoke the warlock off of his watchtower, then use the Valor skill Bear Crush to knock back and immobilize nearby enemies. This doesn't affect flyer-led units or units who have garrisoned, hence why I needed the warlock to abandon his post. As I learned the hard way, this does not force them into rest. Rather, the effect is the same as a steel trap, so these foes can still fight and use assists. After being even more wary of the Warlock's assist range and checking that my team has what they need, the Frostbrand Tome on the Witch to use Ice Conferral, Cloth and normal gauntlets on the Werebears that combine for a 100% guard rate, and the Heaven Wyvern Reigns and Angel Plume on a double Go-Getter Griffin Knight in order for her to act first, I put my plan into action. The Heaven Wyvern Reigns bestow the passive skill Aerial Wing, which, along with an inconsequential attack buff, makes her attack a true strike, allowing the Ice Conferral buffed High Swing to hit and freeze the back row, including the Werefox who would normally dodge with their Nocturnal Evade. Now that the opposing back row can't attack, our Werebears easily guard against the Werewolf's assault, attacking with Bear Crush to inflict stun, and healing nearly back up to full thanks to Nocturnal Rest. Once everyone has finally finished their actions, the bears hit hard with Life Blow. It almost brings a tear to my eye, seeing my damage number that high. With the front row's life blown away, my bears can now beat up the back row. I don't want the enemies to become unfrozen before life blow, so everyone but the griffin doesn't act. While we're just chilling, why don't you make sure you're subscribed so you won't miss out on any exhilarating and exciting content. Oh hey, look, life blow! Yeah! Things are happening! Oh, but there's still Gobble. Well, that like button isn't too far away from the subscribe one, so why not hit both? I mean, we're all having a fun time right now. Oh hey, look, things are happening again! Hope you're ready to life blows, you kilt-wearing son of a— I missed?! Okay, well, I have to fight him again, but my Griffin Knight's out of stamina. Fortunately, I can use a Valor point to switch in the Witch as the leader, who starts with a higher max stamina, so I can start moving without having to use an item to rest, and this time, actually do the Wolf In. If it hasn't become obvious already, Freeze plus Life Blow makes for a terrifyingly effective combination, and to prove the point, I immediately head into Plum Parfum, one of the endgame liberation quests stand between the player and the final mission. Immediately may have been an exaggeration, because my strategy relies on promoting my Witch and Griffin Knight, but I still haven't reached B rank to unlock the promote option. All is well though, as I can hire a level 25 Sorceress that has already learned Quick Cast from the same place I got my two bears, and, despite not yet having a fourth that has Griffin Masters for hire, I can take a pit stop in Elheim, drop in on Caesar, and recruit Celeste. Similar to my approach with Gobble, I only want to fight the boss, and I also can't afford being on the receiving end of magic assists. I use a beckoning bell to get the Warlock off the watchtower, and use a light feather on Celeste. Although Celeste's haste and call would have had the same effect, I need to retain that Valor point. After setting up a Farsight crystal to increase my accuracy for upcoming battles, I draw in the Watchtower Sorceress with another bell and Bear Crush them away, conveniently making myself a little slot where Celeste can fight outside of opposing magic range. The reason I needed a Quick Cast Sorceress was to counter the opposing Quick Cast Sorceress. I made sure my Sorceress outspeeds and can prevent the enemy's Ice Coffin by freezing her first, but my Sorceress doesn't know the row freezing Ice Coffin yet. The single target Ice Bolt stops the Sorceress, but that back row sniper remains untouched. Even though he's capable of killing Celeste 3 times over, I gave her the Power Belt, which bestows Toughness, a passive skill that activates as the user is hit and grants them a buff to survive a lethal blow. This would not work with an unpromoted Griffin Knight, as the promoted Griffin Master has an innate 2 PP for 2 Toughness procs, and an extra accessory slot in which Power Belt can be equipped, without having to replace the initiative boosting accessories she needs to outspeed this front row. The Werebears still have a 100% guard rate from their gauntlets, so they can shrug off the sniper's row shot no problem. With the team intact, the bears can unleash their life blows, which does enough damage to 2-shot each foe, but it's still a slow process. Since we have the time, and I've run out of ways to convince you to subscribe, I want to bring to attention the final interactions during the first battle. Life blows hit the Breaker and Doom Knight, who survived and were cured of their freeze afflictions. Despite them having AP, they didn't act. Let's start from the top again. There are 3 phases in every combat. A battle begins with the start phase, which is when start of battle passive skills, like quick casts, activate. Once those have been resolved, the battle proceeds to the active phase. This pertains to any and every skill that uses active points. You know, the orange ones. The active phase will only end once everyone runs out of AP, or nobody on the field takes an action for 2 turns in a row. Finally, we enter the end phase. This is when end of battle passive skills occur, like our best friend, Life Blow. Active skills cannot activate outside of active phase, so even though these two are no longer frozen and, on paper, could use active skills like their non-frosty sniper friend did, they cannot use AP in the end phase. Ergo, I can abuse the system by freezing an enemy and keeping them frozen through the conclusion of active phase, then attack during end phase with Life Blow, without the enemy having an opportunity to use their AP. Obviously, passive skills can still proc, and if a foe had an end of battle skill, they'd be granted the opportunity to perform it since it applies within the end phase. Anyway, after surgically removing the front row and having Celeste survive through an accumulated total of 1017 damage, yeesh, that poor girl. The Bears avenge our battered and bruised flyer, and claim the area as our own. I earned my first entryway into the final map, but more importantly, I can skip having to liberate Stormtown and still access the Sigil's Trial Zenith. The map itself isn't too concerning. I can get by fighting with my werebears while leaving a dodge tank to guard my command post, but I eventually found out I can just rush in and knock back the ranged assisters and other enemies with Bear Crush, and manufacture a 1v1 against the boss. Now that my sorceress has learned Ice Coffin, I can easily freeze the entire unit and Life Blow my way through the Lenchkonex and Druid, but the Bishop doesn't go down easy. I couldn't kill her in one shot, so she'd either Parting Resurrection to bring someone back, or proc Lifesaver for HP dips below half, resulting in a stalemate. After restarting the fight, I realized I could use Celeste's Fatal Dive to soften up the Bishop for a lethal Life Blow. Fatal Dive is an HP-based attack skill learned exclusively by Griffin Masters. It's nowhere near as potent as a Werebear's Life Blow, but Fatal Dive came in clutch here, so I guess there is some utility for it. Or rather, there was some utility for it. Thanks to the EXP books I earn after every clear, I can level up my bears and increase their HP, to the point where I don't even need to bother with Fatal Dive or making any tactic changes, netting me even more books. Well, now that I've grinded here for some hours, I guess I should probably wrap up that main story. I've been ignoring it ever since I set my sights on werebears, but at this point, it's gonna be a joke. I mean, come on. Berengaria? More like Bear in Garia. Alcina? More like Alcia. Elgor? More like Snore? Nigel? More like Gel? Look, I'm running out of steam here. Okay, those idiots are handled. All that's left to do is to visit some sanctuaries, eat cake, visit some sanctuaries, hire some bears, visit some sanctuaries, eat cake, visit some sanctuaries, marry a bear, visit some sanctuaries, learn to ride a horse, visit some sanctuaries, and hey look, it's the endgame! Due to my expanded selection of characters who are easily trained with the XP books, I have multiple combat competent units for the endgame. One of which is a pretty standard Great Knight team. Ramona leads the unit in order to take advantage of Nightwalk and Flight, and her night vision buffs my front row's accuracy, plus, at night, makes their next attack a True Strike. With both Cavalier Call and Powerful Call buffing their physical attack, my Great Knights can offset their lack of weapons and actually score kills. Since I used the Idealist hand mirrors to change Clive, Adel, and Renault's Grove types to offensive to give them as much oomph as possible, I took the opportunity to dye their hair black and make them as edgy as possible. However, I have by no means forsaken the werebear lifestyle. Besides the fact I was able to add another werebear, Celeste's unit is functionally unchanged. The Sorceress freezes a row with Ice Coffin, Celeste freezes the other row with an Ice Conferral buffed High Swing, and the werebears stand menacingly until it's time to use Life Blow. This may be the werebear team that helped me get to this point, but I have since constructed better team combos. My most effective Freeze Bear team relies on Unify. This unit is led by Dinah, taking advantage of good base mobility made even better by Nightwalk, the Jump Valor skill, and having 6 max stamina. Her combat is inconsequential, as her main purpose is to facilitate Unifi's Glacial Rain via Quick Impetus, a passive skill from the Cat Ear Hood accessory that lets an ally immediately act again. This effectively skips Glacial Rain's charge turn, allowing Unifi to freeze everyone turn 1. One of my werebears has a Gambler's Coin to buff Unifi with Inspiration, increasing attack and critical hit damage at the cost of accuracy, but Unifi's Eagle Eye guarantees that she hits. You can actually get kills with this, and anyone who ends up surviving will get bludgeoned by the werebears. Sometimes, I may face units with a covering skill that protects a foe from Glacial Rain, but by setting my werebears to only use Bear Crush against non-frozen foes, I can attack them to trigger Unifi's follow-up skill, Snow White Strike, to inflict freeze, then wait out the battle so the werebears can start life-blowing. A different werebear has the Sage Owl's Shawl, giving him access to the Were Owl passive skill, Quick Dispel. This serves as extra utility that lets me, for instance, thwart quick cast sorceresses from freezing me first. Bertrand is my hardest hitting bear. After making his growth types hardy, using all the stat boosters I can, equipping the Arvelda's Talisman, and getting to the max level 50, Bertrand boasts an incredibly high HP stat, as the most powerful life blow out of all my werebears. But if Bertrand, the Ring of the Maiden recipient, is on this team, where's his other half? Belane's sole purpose is to be a body on the field and not die, so to accomplish this, I've paired him with 4 archer bodyguards. My 2 feather bows have Shining Light to inflict heroic blindness, which should afford Galadmir and Vidiel to use Icicle Arrow and each freeze 2 enemies. I deal next to no damage to any enemies left unfrozen, and conclude every battle with Overkill Healing courtesy of Party Aid, which also triggers the Elven Archers to activate Selfless Heal. My final bear team makes use of another Frostbrand Tome to grant Ice Conferral for Eltalinda's Elemental Roar, which attacks, and now freezes, all enemies. The reason this is my last werebear team isn't because I got bored with them. Instead, I literally ran out of bears to recruit. As it turns out, including Bertrand, 9 werebears is the limit. Even though Elemental Roar in this context is purely utility based, it can become an extremely powerful move with the right setup, something I can still accomplish without weapons. Rosalinda starts the battle with Rage of the Fairies, which attacks and stuns a row. Gilbert restores her PP with the Lapis Bell's passive gift, and buffs the team's attack by 20% with Offensive Order. After the 2 druids use Defensive Curse to cut the foe's defenses in half, Rosalinda uses Sylphic Wind, a magical attack that triggers Sorcerous Connection, which will buff her magic attack by 50%. The other druid has a Cat Ear Hood to activate Quick Impetus, and let Rosalinda act again immediately. After receiving 3 AP through her own Elemental Impetus, the druid's Quick Impetus, and Chloe's active gift, Rosalinda uses Elemental Roar to deal an astounding amount of damage. Rosalinda has the Sniper's Amber Lens to use Hawkeye, allowing her to make Elemental Roar a true strike and a guaranteed critical hit. Chloe buffs this even further with Inspiration, increasing attack by 30% and making crits deal 2 times damage as opposed to the standard 1.5 times multiplier. Rage of the Fairies, Sylphic Wind, and Elemental Impetus summon +1 fairy each, which turns Elemental Roar into a 160 potency move, attacking both physically and magically. If Rosalinda cannot outspeed the opposition, I can instead opt to use Gilbert's start a battle skill, Rapid Order, to grant my unit +20 initiative. Due to Rosalinda being unable to summon a fairy through Rage of the Fairies, Elemental Roar won't be as strong, but all this means is that she'll overkill with like 300 damage as opposed to 400 damage, so really it's fine. As I make progress on the map, Nigel makes a dramatic entrance and joins us as a reinforcement, and by that, I mean 1 free Valor point. Herman also shows up, alongside the green Might of Dragonhold, but there are no forts nearby and he's far too slow, so I just strip down his unit and make him sit in the corner. After I clear out the castle town to maximize my valor, I regroup, set up Clairvoyance, and charge towards Galerius with a specialized team designed to kill him specifically. Galerius has to start a battle skill that lets him negate the next 6 hits, but Rosalinda outspeeds and gets to use Rage of the Fairies and stuns him. Stun can only be naturally recovered during active phase, since Incapacitated counts as an active skill, so start phase concludes before Galerius can get his Darkness Armor. During the active phase, Bertrand and Unifi attack just because I can deal some extra damage while still ensuring he's stunned and frozen at the end of combat. Bertrand's Bear Crush inflicts stun, while an Ice Conferral buff from Rosalinda and Unifi's Snow White Strike inflict freeze. I want him stunned at the end because even after the first life blow thaws him out of freeze, stun will prevent him from activating his passive skills, and since active phase is passed, he will not recover from stun. Galerius heals for 200 HP after every combat, but I deal a total of over 500 damage per combat, so just with a few more life blows, the Overlord's reign is over.
Galerius, Emperor of Zenoiran. Your ambitions are laid bare.
Since I've completed all other main story quests, I have the option to emancipate Galerius' soul in order to get the true ending, but I now must overcome Baltro. He has a unit of 6 members, which may seem threatening, but they're not immune to freeze. I remade Bertrand's unit and have Unify do her thing with Glacial Rain. Baltro is a one-trick pony, only having the skill Unicorn's Wrath. It's basically supposed to be an instant kill against your entire unit that can only be stopped by Celestial Light, a passive skill exclusive to the Bearer of the Ring of the Maiden. However, if Baltro is frozen, he never gets a chance to use it. The opposing team has many startup battle skills, but only one may activate per unit, as denoted by the limited trait. The character with the greatest initiative among their unit will have their skill activated, while the other ones get ignored. Since I've killed Bastorias and Theodora, the next highest priority startup battle skill is Narcessa's Ominous Wall, which grants all her allies a buff to negate one attack. This will block the damage and freeze affliction from Unify's Glacial Rain, so I need a different team to take her down. The Sorceress can use Ice Coffin on the back row to neutralize Ominous Wall, then Celeste can follow up with an Ice Conferral on High Swing to freeze them. Galerius goes untouched, but disregarding Celeste taking poison damage from his Poison Touch, he's not threatening, as his tactics dictate him to spam Dark Armor. Upon the battle's end, the Werebears take out the remaining 2 retainers, leaving just Baltro and Galerius. Galerius is finally able to use his startup battle skill, Dark Armor, which lets him negate the next 2 hits. The wording here, hits versus attacks, is an important distinction because Unify's Glacial Rain, despite being one attack, hits 3 times, so it will break through the Dark Armor and still freeze him. The bears tear through Galerius easily enough, but despite what the damage numbers may suggest, Baltro survives. He will only die by the hands of Elaine using the ultimate attack from the Ring of the Unicorn, Astral Blade. I'm not sure what blade is being referenced here since Elaine's sword slot is empty, but he still manages to finish Baltro off. Elaine and Bertrand pose for a while and cast a Spirit Bomb to purge this foul demon, marking the conclusion and completion of the Weaponless Challenge. I quite enjoyed this run. In normal gameplay, the stamina system, constant flow of enemy reinforcements, and time limit on every map encourages the player to be aggressive. In order to be optimal, one must make units with overwhelming offense to defeat enemies efficiently by expending as little stamina as possible. This challenge, however, defies that philosophy. Due to the downgrade in power caused by removing all my character's weapons, made even more apparent in the early game since base stats start so low, the typical solution of just hit hard with direct damage was borderline impossible to pull off. The challenge was heavily front-loaded. Starting with limited access to classes and skills, coupled with small unit sizes, forced me to be creative with tactics and team building, such as having a far greater reliance on poison and burn damage. Although the challenge was more or less trivialized once I got my hands on Werebears and their Lifeblow skill, I really had to earn my way to access the class, let alone the fact I had to figure out how to make them effective, and also realize Werebears were even a win condition at all. Towards the end, I had so much freedom and customization options that, even without weapons, I was capable of making teams that could deal direct damage. All in all, playing Unicorn Overlord without equipping weapons forced me to approach the game completely differently, which was a very refreshing and unique experience. Anyway, final thoughts. Freeze is absolutely busted if used properly, Werebears and Lifeblow are very funny, and thank you for watching.